Hello, mai kako. For those of you who are with us this morning's session, welcome back. Those of you who are with us for the first time today, whether in person or online via Zoom, welcome and mahalo for joining our symposium, E Hoʻi Nani, Chief Justice Richardson's Public Trust Legacy and Envisioning the Future of Hawaii. Our third panel today, to kick off our afternoon session, will attempt to shed light on a harsh reality. Dominant interests in water rights are still tied to colonial forces. In light of the recent Maui fires, legal scholars have categorized certain actions by the development community and the governor's administration as a form of disaster capitalism. This panel will discuss the impacts of this exact legacy of settler colonialism, resulting from over a century of plantation water diversion, exacerbated by the impacts of global climate change. Our moderator for this critical discussion can most aptly be described as a force of nature. Professor Kupua Alasprout is recognized as a renowned legal scholar who has published groundbreaking scholarship in the areas of restorative justice, indigenous rights, and natural and cultural resource management and protection. She has been a member of the Richardson faculty since 2007 and has taught a variety of courses in legal writing, Native Hawaiian rights, and environmental law. Kupua is also the current director of Kuhuliau Center for Excellence in Native Hawaiian Law. That's a position, a kuleana, that she inherited from Professor Emerita Melody McKenzie, who moderated our first panel this morning. Ever humble, Kupua would likely describe herself as the proud mother of two boys, Ulu and Ola, and the daughter of a family of fishers and farmers in Kalihiwai, Halelea, Kauai. She is all of those things and so much more. Before becoming a professor, she was an attorney at Earth Justice, where she developed a particular expertise in water law, working on landmark cases in Waiahole and Navaeha to return diverted stream flows to public trust uses, including traditional Hawaiian agriculture and aquaculture. She currently supervises the Native Hawaiian Rights Clinic, which has provided support to Maui Komohana community members in their pre- and post-fire efforts to secure their water rights. Her article, published in The Guardian, Why Was There No Water to Fight the Fires in Maui, co-authored with Naomi Klein, coined the phrase plantation disaster capitalism and inspired the foundation for this panel. Please join me in welcoming Professor Kupua Alasprout.
Aloha mai kako. Mahalo, Drew, for that overly generous introduction, as always. And mahalo for joining us as we explore plantation disaster capitalism and the legacy of settler colonialism in Maui Komohana. It's an honor for me to moderate this esteemed panel with so many of my me'e and people who are really on the ground and doing the work in the community. I think this morning we heard, especially from our first panel, the promise and potential of what the law and the public trust should be. But what you will hear from this panel is what it really is on the ground for most of our community members every single day. At the outset, I'd really like to mahalo our conference organizers. Can you please join me in recognizing them again? For all of you sitting in the audience for whom everything seems completely polished and professional, and it is, I don't think you have a full sense of what it took to really pull this off, all the blood, sweat, and tears that really went into making this symposium possible, and what these students have done, everything from raising the funds for this conference when folks told them that it couldn't be done if they didn't have firm sponsorship, to wrangling presenters, is completely aligned with CJ's vision for this law school and the perfect way to honor his legacy, especially 50 years after the McBride decision and the reemergence of Hawaii's public trust. So mahalo piha to all of you who've worked so hard to make this possible. Now on to our panel. As Kumupu'eo and Drew noted at the outset, ola I ka wai, water is life. And as people who live on tiny islands in the middle of the vast Pacific Ocean, Moananui Kea, we here in Hawaii are keenly aware that fresh water is a vital source of life for us across the Pai'aina, right, across this entire archipelago. Since time immemorial, Kanaka have revered water as a kinolau of Akuakane, right, a physical embodiment of one of our major gods. It feeds our indigenous culture, and it defines who we are as a people. Vai is really a life force that sustains all of our natural and cultural resources. And yet the story of Vai in Hawaii, as you began to hear, I think especially from our second panel this morning, is unfortunately similar to those across island Earth. As we heard, freshwater was revered throughout our society, carefully managed as a public trust for present and future generations. It was the foundations for natural systems, indigenous law and communities, and entire islands. It was also coveted by settlers who moved to our shores, especially to subsidize the rise of plantation agriculture, which, as the first panel discussed, and then actually urban and resort development, not just in Maui Komohana, which our panel will focus on, but across our island chain. And the commodification of freshwater really rewrote the social contract and transformed life in Hawaii as we know it. In many ways, centuries of plantation water mismanagement combined with the climate emergency and unprecedented drought set the stage for the deadly wildfires that ravaged Maui Komohana, or West Maui. But we have here with us today 3 thought leaders who have made water their life's work. Our panelists are unwavering advocates for Native Hawaiian rights and Hawaii's public trust doctrine, and through their lives and work, they have challenged and I believe have fundamentally reshaped the legacy of settler colonialism, especially in the context of Hawaii's water resources. So now for the official intros, and you can hold your raucous applause until I'm pau with all 3. But on our far right, Kekai Keahi needs no introduction. He is a Maui Komohana community leader and Kia'iwai, and a 9th generation Lahaina resident. He is an educator and a thought leader, advocating for Maui Komohana and its vai since before it was a thing of panels and infamous Instagram videos. But as a farmer and a leader, especially of Kamalu o Kahalawai, Kekai has been a steadfast advocate for his community for decades in a wide range of areas, everything from the issuance of commercial boating permits that Kanoe talked about earlier to the return of water to Kahoma Stream. Exactly. He's getting the cheers from the guys in the back. So for years now, Kekai has called for the increased oversight of the legacy plantation interests whose extractive mismanagement of the land transformed Lahaina into a tinderbox. And he has played a key role in the rebuilding of his town in the wake of the devastating 2023 fires. And he continues, as you just heard, to inspire the next generation of our kia'iwai and practitioners. He is a true example of pono, and he puts kaia'ulu, ohana, and aina above all else. Elena Bryant is a senior associate attorney at Earth Justice's Mid-Pacific office here in Honolulu. She received her BA in Hawaiian Studies from the University of Hawaiʻi at Manoa and her JD from this fine institution, including a Native Hawaiian Law certificate. Before joining Earth Justice, Elena clerked for Hawaii's Intermediate Court of Appeals and Judge Barry Curran on the U.S. District Court for the District of Hawaii. In her Earth Justice capacity, Elena has been providing direct legal services to the Maui Komohana community for several years now, from their struggle to secure more protection for their water resources through designation to their current battles before the Water Commission and at the legislature. She has been deeply involved in water issues on Kauai, where she continues to support community groups Po'ai Vaiola and Nakia'ikai in their efforts to restore the Waimea River watershed and to protect their nearshore ecosystems and cultural resources. And finally, Wayne Tanaka grew up on Oahu, exploring the tide pools of Vavaumalu and the streams of Kaneohe and He'eia, and the ridgelines of the Ko'olau Mountains. He is a fisher, a father, and more. In his day job, he has been the director for the Sierra Club of Hawaii, but he has been a fearless advocate for and protector of Hawaii's diverse environment and unique culture that grows along with it for much longer. Wayne's tenure at the club was preceded by about a decade of work in public policy at the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and his time there culminated as chief policy advocate, but from very early on, he earned the honorific title of Wayne Tanaka Maoli for his tireless efforts on behalf of Hawaii's indigenous people and resources, and that is no small feat within our lahui. Wayne is also a scholar, having co-authored numerous chapters in both the inaugural and the forthcoming revised edition of the Native Hawaiian Law Treatise, though his writing and expertise includes much more: indigenous food sovereignty, land use, water, and the intersection of race and politics in Hawaii, among other topics. But Wayne Tanaka Maoli walks his talk. His passion for native ecosystems and community-based resource management led him to the board of directors for a myriad of conservation organizations. And he is also a licensed attorney and an engineer, as well as a proud graduate of this fine institution, Harvey Mudd College, and an unnamed private school down the road. So for all the baby lawyers in the room, these are the kinds of attorneys and advocates that I hope you will be when you grow up. Please join me in welcoming this phenomenal panel. So given our time and focus this afternoon, I'd like to start by asking our panelists to help me set the stage, if you will, by providing some context for our discussion and plantation disaster capitalism in particular. Until a couple years ago, I had never heard of the term Maui Komohana, which is a traditional name for West Maui. So this is around the area of Mauna Oe'eka, which we heard about this morning, and Nahonoa Pi'ilani, the famous bays of Pi'ilani, a chief who ruled Maui during the 15th century. So for those in the audience, and I know we have many kupa here, but for those in the audience who are less familiar with this area, if we look at a map of Maui, what we're talking about today is the head of Maui, right? That's Maui Komohana. And before we can dive into plantation disaster capitalism, we need to immerse ourselves in this special place. So Kekai, you are a kupa of Maui Komohana, of Lahaina and Kahoma in particular. Please share with us your Ohana's Vice story. What was Maui Komohana like before the arrival of Westerners in Hawaii?
You know, since we're also talking about colonization, we tend to use, when they refer to Lahaina as the Venice of the Pacific, it is for their own minds to understand what this place is like compared to where they're from. And so to get away from colonization, I like to see Venice as the Lahaina of Europe. And so, you know, it's taking our consciousness to a different place, but we're not looking through the lens of colonization. But I'll use that for now. Lahaina was the Pacific. Venice of the Pacific. The interesting about Lahaina is we have so much water and waterways that if you look at a lot of our maps, Lahaina was known for having inland fish ponds. Well, we used to see fish ponds that stretched out into the ocean. We have a lot of fish ponds that was inland, and that was because of the water that we had there. Thriving fish ponds. We talk about Moku'ula and Mokuhinia a lot with the more of a lake situation there, and Alamihi. These things are gone today. And, you know, it was a thriving place. People, they even talk about Lahaina as being the breadbasket of the Pacific with the amount of food they could produce. I believe there was a story, I can't remember what chief was, but they was preparing war on Oahu, and they looked over on Maui and was like, these guys are growing a lot of food for something. They're getting ready for something. What's going on? And it was the ability of this place to sustain, not just a society, but, you know, to produce surplus so that it can sustain one a campaign such as war on a different island. And so, you know, that was the Lahaina that was there prior to Westerners coming in. And not the Lahaina that we know today.
Alana, what else do people need to know about Maui Komohana's vai before the arrival of settlers?
Yeah, to continue on what Kekai has already shared, you know, Lahaina was a wetland. It wasn't always this hot, dry, parched desert that a lot of people are familiar with. Streams fed Mokuhinia Fish Pond, which was a 17-acre spring-fed lokoʻia kalo that encircled the island of Moku'ula. And Mokuʻula was the seat of government and power. It was the capital of the Hawaiian kingdom. It was the home to Hawaiian royalty. And it's where the 1839 Declaration of Rights and the 1840 Constitution were promulgated. And that really established the foundation of Hawaii's public trust doctrine. So, Lahaina was a vibrant and productive wetland community that was central to Native Hawaiian culture and commerce. During the earlier panel, Uncle Paul Rapun talked about endemic knowledge. And here, Kamalu'uluolele, the beloved breadfruit groves, these groves were planted to provide shade that captured rainwater and condensation and created a cooler and more temperate microclimate and mitigated soil erosion and the effects of Lele's powerful kaua'ula wind. And this community was really an example of brilliant endemic knowledge and Kanaka Maoli ecological management and water stewardship.
What else, Wayne?
Maybe just to emphasize the perspective and the relationship with Aina that underlied the abundance of Lahaina and really across the Kapai Aina Hawaii. Aina wasn't viewed as like land in the Western sense where you can own it, you buy and sell it, you try to extract as much personal profit from it as possible. Aina is really, as Kapua points out in some of her writings, literally your family. Like literally the ancestors that took care of you, the generations before you that are taking care of you, and that will take care of your children, future generations. And so there's this existential kuleana to take care of that ancestor and have this reciprocal relationship that is then, that we then see embodied in a lot of not just the land use practices and in the abundance, that Westerners encountered, but also in the laws of the kingdom, and which we'll probably get into in a little bit.
Basically the kahua for Aloha Aina, really, which is so important because in many ways that is the foundation of Hawaii's public trust, right? We look back to the 1839 Declaration of Rights, the 1840 Constitution, but at its core, it's really about Aloha Aina. And those are important not just as values, but really as legal precepts for the discussion that we're having today. There's been more discussion lately about Kamalu'uluolele and how important that is. Can someone share a little bit about Kamalu'uluolele? In whatever sense.
No, just in the name itself already. The Lahaina we know today is pretty barren, pretty dry. We don't see that same forest that used to be there in Malu, the shade that the ulu trees used to provide, that when allow the springs to run, it allowed our groundwater to recharge, but it also gave the ability to sustain life, not just with the fruits that we can get from the trees, but with also keeping our ground moist and protecting our ground. And hence, Malu is also to protect. It's not just the shade. So it protects our ground from that merciless sun that we always talk about on the west side of Maui, and actually helps to provide and sustain a population that was a pretty good sized population back in those days.
Mm-hmm. Mahalo, that's exactly right. I think when people think of the beloved breadfruit groves, right, that we've talked about, people think of it exactly as Kekai was mentioning, as a source of food, but it really, that shade was so vital to the entire ecosystem to really, and even today when you go back to areas like the Palakikos, or you go to areas of Lahaina where there's still lo'i and there's still shaded areas, like physically you can feel the difference when you go back there. I was also hoping someone would share a little bit about mo'o and kihavahine, because those are so important to understanding this area. Anyone? Any takers? Any takers on mo'o, kihavahine?
I don't know if I'd do it justice. Well, kihavahine was the mo'o that protected, this area, and was really a really important mo'o in the history of Hawaii. It was the mo'o that King Kamehameha Pae'a relied on when he was unifying the Hawaiian Islands, and so just a really powerful, important deity. And she called Moku'ula mokuhina her home. And so what was really devastating, and I know we'll get into this discussion later, but when these places were diverted, all the water was diverted from these places and they dried up, the home of Kiha Wahine is literally under 3 feet of sediment and dirt. And so I think, and I don't want to speak for the community, but I've heard very strongly that it's very important for the community that this place be restored and that Kiha Wahine can return.
Mahalo, Elena. And I am less familiar with Maui Komohana than I am in other areas like Nawaiʻeha, but when we think of these fish ponds that Kekai was describing, and the streams that feed into these historic fish ponds and springs, these were also pathways, groundwater pathways, right? So our water flows overland in our streams from Maka to Makai and also underground into our nearshore marine areas. And what's important for us to understand today is that these groundwater channels and these wetted channels are important not just to provide pathways for our wai, but they're also important for our native biota to be able to travel back and forth. And they're also important for Kiha Wahine, right? From a spiritual perspective, it's really important for Kiha Wahine to be able to move throughout the area in these wetted resources. And so from a spiritual practice and perspective, it's really important for us to consider the role of wai historically and into the present. So I think that helps to provide some context for this important area, which I think brings us to settler colonialism in the context of wai. So by all accounts and by what we've heard here, right, Maui Komohana was a true kipuka of natural and cultural wonders. Na Honua Pi'ilani, the Venice of the Pacific, whatever we want to call it, right, this famous and important area that was home, really, for so many people. But what happened with the arrival of Westerners, especially in the context of wai? I think when many folks think of colonialism, they think of people coming in, taking native land, sending folks to Western schools and churches, and that happened across our Pai'ana and in Maui Komohana. But a key aspect of control here was also theft of resources, and water resources in particular, that both subsidized plantation agriculture, including sugar and pineapple plantations, and left Native Hawaiians bereft and houseless. So these are the folks at the bottom of the hill that Chief Justice Richardson was thinking about and was worried about in the McBride decision, right? We have the 2 sugar companies that are fighting against each other for who controls the water, when really it's the kalo farmers and other folks that are being truly impacted. So let's start again with Kekai as our kupa, or resident expert. How did your Ohana's wai story change with the arrival of Westerners and the plantations in Lahaina?
First, I'd like to start off with the Hawaiian concept of land and water and resources is so different compared to the Western concept. Maybe being there from continents where the resources are a lot more vast. We live on islands where things are finite, and so we adapt and learn to live with nature, understanding that the resources is finite. And so a lot of times what we see is with the intrusion of plantations, they come in with that Western ideology of these resources being just limitless. And so during the plantation era, they start diverting all these streams and moving these water out into the sugarcane fields. A lot of times what happened was it was displacing a lot of the Hawaiians that was living in these valleys. I talk with my cousin about this a lot, and it's not just that they was trying to raise sugarcane. It became systematic. Well, when they took the water away, they could grow cane, but they needed to work on labor force. A lot of the people who was in these valleys who could not survive on their lands anymore found themselves working for the same plantations that took away the water. And then later on, these plantations grabbing onto their land. Then the plantation said, you know what, I'm going to set up one camp for you and you live in our homes. I said, and you know what, shop from our stores. And then you can get products brought in from overseas on our ships. And then you become stuck in this system, and it's hard to get out. And we like to look at the plantations as sometimes a good thing, where you brought a lot of different ethnic groups to Hawaii and it became the melting pot. And as far as that goes, it's great. But sometimes I know in Lahaina we had this thing called plantation days, and they would it was on festivity honoring the plantation era. And just with complete disregard to what really went happen to a lot of the local people in Lahaina because of the plantations. Our family was the last family in Lahaina to raise taro. And my grandparents fought hard to try and maintain almost 4 acres of taro. They diverted the stream above in Kanaha where we were farming. And so what they did was they brought on 2-inch pipe, ran a 2-inch pipe about 2 miles up into the mountain to the intake just to try and get some kind of water to the taro patches. And they fought hard to hold on. They even had to adapt to taro that could grow in warmer waters, you know. So a lot of things had to change, but even then, it slowly, you cannot maintain. You cannot maintain. Our family's history in Lahaina, especially with Lahaina Luna High School, we was there when the Lahaina Luna High School was built, 1831. Our family was the one that made sure that Lahaina Luna got its water to feed the school with the amount of scholars. And David Malo and Kamakawa, guess what? The Keʻau Yohana was supplying water to these buggers so they could learn. So, and that's how I was tied to Lahaina Luna and the school. And you know, we're not there in that valley anymore. It's been maybe, shucks, I think we left that valley when I was in 7th or 8th grade. The land is still there, but we're not farming them. And it was because of the plantation, but plantation gone now, they're gone. And the people we fighting now for the water, believe it or not, is the county. The county taking all our water. And sometimes we look at the government as supposed to be protecting our rights and our resources, so but they're taking them too. And so I know the IFS for Kanaha has been set, and we still no more water back in Kanaha stream. You know, so I don't know. We like to say there's all these laws in place that's supposed to protect us and do these things, but sometimes I don't really have that much faith in the law. Most of I get plenty faith in our people, though. I get plenty faith in our people, and if we gotta twist arms so that they paying attention to the law, then that's what we gotta do. But you know, the fire of August 8th never stopped. August 8th started 130 years ago when they started diverting all of our streams on the west side.
And actually, why don't we transition to Wayne? Wayne, please connect this up for us with settler colonialism, right? Exactly what Kekai just shared, and related to, like, right? What about the law? What about given our long-standing commitment to the public trust since time immemorial? All these things that we've talked about, and yet the settlers and the plantations were still able to do this. How did they do this? How did this connect?
So I think as Kekai points out, you know, the law, and as attorneys and as law students, as we hopefully understand, the law exists and operates in the context of society, right, of a large society. And so when you see what was going on in the 19th century, you know, first you have the epidemics, and that decimated population. You have changes to the religious system. You have invasive species. You know, all these things that kind of disconnect people from Aina, which then creates openings for more systemic aggression, you know, against these, you know, traditional values and policies and how they're implemented towards a more, you know, a more Western system, and even to the point where Hawaii was temporarily taken over by, you know, by a British Navy captain, culminating and which, you know, then triggered even a greater, you know, I think the kingdom, Kalikili, recognized, you know, he needs to start standing up like way more Western systems of property and land tenure, and that again creates even more openings for the plantations, the Western interests to start influencing society and policy and law and governance, leading all the way up to, you know, as we know, the Bayonet Constitution, subsequently the insurrection after the Queen of Lokalani tried to correct that injustice, and then you have, you know, almost 10 years of control under a Republic of Hawaii that was explicitly established to not just pursue annexation, but to disenfranchise the Hawaiian and the Portuguese population in the islands. And then you have annexation when the Republic was eventually successful. And then you see this massive expansion of the oligarchical power from the plantations to, despite the really, it's interesting because annexation actually restored the vote to, the larger population. And if you look at, the election results, the elected bodies were, decisively controlled by Lahaina. But under that territorial system, the governor is not elected. He's appointed by Washington, D.C. And so you have the executive branch, which is where the rubber hits the road, right? Really controlling all of how land is distributed, how resources are distributed, what kinds of policies to pursue, what kind of policies and issues to ignore, vetoing, laws passed by the Hawaiian-dominated legislature, including laws, looking at things like access to healthcare, especially in rural areas, looking at tax relief for the indigent population, and then through the oligarchical control, further displacement of communities like that. These people have to go somewhere, right? So, working in the fields, moving to urban areas where then you also encounter a completely different set of social conditions, including poverty, including disease, including racism, including like cultural suppression, right, and assimilation. And so, and through that, up to the present day, we're now wrestling with all of those structures of power, all of those traumas that weren't developed overnight, but were developed over generations, and in many ways intentionally so. And so we do have actually some fairly progressive laws that recognize the legacies of historical injustice and the need to address those things. And I think we're starting to also understand how our very future and our ability to have a hopeful future hinges upon whether or not we can pivot our society to once again re-recognize all of these understandings and these connections, which is why I'm just what Kekai folks are doing is, it's so powerful and so important, and we're at this inflection point where we can decide whether we want to continue and reinforce the status quo, or if we want to try to do things in a different way, in a way that's going to establish true security and true resilience for Hawaii, not just Maui Komohana, but in my perspective for Hawaii as a whole.
Mahalo for that, Wayne. Elena, what else do folks need to know? Kekai talked about how the 2023 fires didn't start on August 8th, right? It started 130 years before. So how, and then Wayne, connected this up together to this larger system of plantation kind of management and control. But how did a century or so of plantation water mismanagement transform Lahaina into a tinderbox?
Yeah, excessive water diversions by the plantations and land developers with colonial roots really are what turned Lahaina into a desert that's overrun by these dry, invasive, flammable grasses. And these streams were the lifeblood of the Kanaka communities that grew up around them. But these plantation stream diversions and wells completely drained these areas of Waiʻi. And this outright water theft is really colonization. Plantations stole from those, with superior rates to water. They used the lack of water to drive Kanaka off of their lands, which the plantations later took through adverse possession and quiet title. And land ownership is really a foreign concept. It's not a Maoli custom. Land could never be owned. It was managed and stewarded for the benefit of people. And so, we have Kanaka being uprooted from their homes, plantations coming in and claiming ownership over these lands. And this was really pervasive on Maui, and especially in Maui Komohana. But the plantation water mismanagement also starved Lahaina of its natural ecologies. The malu was gone, the shade that we talked about, the ulu trees, the lowland forests, they were burned by the plantations, and streams were so extensively diverted that the stream beds were dry most of the time. And so this meant for Lahaina specifically, this is the seat of power in government, and it was dried up and buried in sediment. And in place of these areas that were once rich with lowland forests, now we have a variety of highly invasive grasses and brush taking over, and this is what really transformed Lahaina into a tinderbox.
And so, and this is for anybody, maybe Wayne, but how does this all relate to McBride, right? I mean, we have this, we have this, you know, Kamalu'uluolele, this Nahonoa Pi'ilani, this Venice of the Pacific that is drain dry and pump dry for 100 years. But how does this relate to McBride? We heard so much this morning about how, you know, how many years before the promise and potential of the public trust and management for future generations. What happened?
So I think, you know, McBride, you know, this just illustrates what happens when you have these Western capitalist perspectives and interests control resources, control aina and water, right? And so, you know, once plantations have taken the water away from the people and from aina, then they fight each other, right? And that's really what, you know, McBride and Robinson came out of. And it's just, I think it's testament to the unsustainability of these ideas that you can own and you can hoard and you can exert personal, private control over water. You know, I think it's interesting. You know, as the Water Commission was wrestling with this inch and flow standards for West Maui, you know, in Kolo'ula, they actually took aerial photographs of the area and how, you know, to try and figure out what water was being used for. Launiupoko Irrigation Company had been taking reportedly about 3.97 million gallons of water per day. But when they looked at what was actually being grown in terms of crops and acreage, including coconut trees, and they extrapolated what is the water duty from, you know, for actual agriculture in that IFSAR area, it turned out they were only using 0.3 million gallons of water per day. So 92% of the water that was being monopolized and hoarded was not being used for agriculture at all. I mean, it was and you look at it, it's like swimming pools, big green grass lawns, and the rest of the landscape is dry. And again, just to say, like, this, you know, this is like a microcosm for what, you know, a lot of other places look like, what Hawaii is going to look like as we wrestle with the impacts of the climate crisis. And it's just, you know, in my perspective, unsustainable. So again, you know, we actually have good laws in the books. I think as a society, we need to figure out if we want to, you know, actually give life to those laws and give meaning to those laws, or if we continue to disregard them and continue to be complacent, really, with the status quo.
And thank you for that, because we've heard a lot about how Maui Komohana in particular is going through the worst drought that it has ever experienced, which means that people on the county systems go on drought restrictions. Can't wash your car, limited to the amount of water that you can use if you have a little mala or you have a little garden that provides food to feed your family. So the folks, especially those on the county water system, which is a small percentage, say, you know, 30% or so, and that's being generous, of the area. These are the people who are on drought restriction, right? But the private corporations in the areas that Wayne is talking about that control really about 75% or more of that water are not. So they still have swimming, you know, on the golf courses and at the resorts, the greens are still all cherry. And it's just the community members who are limited. And so that has created a lot of issues, and that's something that other folks can. So that's, I guess, the gap between the promise and potential of the law and then how it's not really coming to life on the ground and in the community. Does anybody, Kikai, or any of you folks want to add anything on that?
I can add a little bit to that. I say this like on broken record, but you know, 22% of the water resource on the west side is controlled by the counties, which goes to the public. 78%, 77% of the water that is resource on the west side goes all to private purveyors, resorts, swimming pools, mansions on the hill. And so none of the infrastructure between the county and these private purveyors none of the infrastructure are tied together. So if on the county end we start running short of water, we cannot tap into the private purveyors and pull water from them to support the community. Yet the county supports probably 80% of the west side. And so the majority of water is going all to these golf courses and stuff. And, you know, one thing about the fire, the thing when they expose a lot of things to us, and I was talking with Kaipo and stuff like that, you know, when they expose a lot of things to where, if, you know, sometimes we got to go through struggles to come up with, you know, the right answers to address what's happening. And what the fire when exposes that, you know, we cannot continue on this path thinking that, you know, okay, well, before we never used to go on drought restriction, now we're on drought restriction, so we just adapt. And if you can think like that, you're gonna get taken advantage of. You cannot adapt, you gotta challenge. And so what we looked at is, okay, we fought to get the IFS back, or the in-stream flow standards, and we fought for designation, and we soon realized that wasn't enough. That's not enough to protect that, and so we are fighting now to restore that bulk of the water that is controlled by private purveyors and bring them back into public hands. We're not even done with that. We look at R1, right? Reclaimed water from sewers. R1 is water that you can pretty much almost drink. Not to say that we're going to use them in our homes, but maybe for our parks, our schools, grounds, fire hydrants, whatever it is. We was up here a couple weeks ago at a meeting at Turtle Bay with a lot of people from the state and stuff. And when I brought up R1, a lot of them don't see R1 water as a resource. They see it as waste, which is like, Lahaina, we produce almost 9 million gallons of water a day, R1 water a day. And they saw that as waste. So when we were saying, you know what, we cannot afford to have swimming pools. We have to change the code to where we cannot have swimming pools on the west side anymore. Some of them was like, oh, well, just fill them up with R1 then. That's crazy that their level of consciousness or understanding is so lacking. And what this fight did was move us into a whole new level of understanding about our place and what we need to do to protect our place so that our kids get to live there. Yeah. Somebody just told me, who was you, Kaipo? Like 40% of the people on west side, not even from the west side, not even from Maui. That's scary then, and yet they control the vast majority of all of our water resources. And so, again, what is scary too, also in the rebuilding, well, all of our communities come together and try to figure out how we're going to rebuild so it's best, you know, it's for the best of our place. And what scares me is we might be looking to for the answers through a colonized lens. And we might be making wrong decisions thinking we're making the right decision. And so you got to reassess. You got to question yourself. And sometimes hard because you question yourself. And then I find out, man, the stuff that my father used to teach me is wrong. You know, like go against your father. You know, like against your mother. You know, like say that my family was wrong. But you can't help them. They coming from a colonized place too. And so you got to have that hard talk with yourself and think to yourself, is this the right thing, or am I seeing it through a colonized lens? If not, we're going to put ourselves back into the bad position again. And then the last thing is that, you know, people talking about the Great Reset in Lahaina, we get that chance and opportunity to put Lahaina in a direction that is more geared to you know, take care of our community first rather than putting us as second-class citizens to tourism, where they get everything. And so we move into that in that direction, but then we see the powers at hand. They're trying to reset the status quo. We see laws at the legislature that's coming through that we have nothing to know about. We see people that trying to massage some of our leaders in the West Side to say, hey, man, let's do this. And then so there's not really one divide in our community. We're all aiming for the right place, but get people influencing certain people in our community to try and steer us back into the status quo that was there prior to the fact. Because right now they hate what we see as a community. They hate what we're trying to do. They fear the loss of power. They fear that. And again, a lot of times our own people, because of that colonized lens, sometimes might look at us. And a lot of people who was up here on the panel and the panel is coming to be, I'm pretty sure there's a time when our own people look at us as troublemakers and we're no good. But that's okay, you know? Because when you look back in history, you're going to be like, bro, these guys. Right? Some of us went transcend into a different level of thinking and understanding before them, but they came later. So that's okay. But, you know, guys who, you know, earth shakers sometimes got to ride alone for a little while, you know? Yeah.
Not troublemakers, advocates.
Exactly.
I think that's not a bad word too.
Yeah. Yeah, nowadays.
We'll reframe that a little bit. Thought leaders.
Thought leaders.
That's how I introduced Kekai at the beginning.
I got to think about that.
Like it or not is how it is. So, is there more that we need to know about what happened on August 8th, 2023 to set the stage for the next part of our discussion on plantation disaster capitalism?
Well, I'll just kind of drive home what you folks have already said. With the McBride case, we had this paradigm shift in our water law and policy, and really CJ's vision of water is the right to water should be preserved and protected for the people of Hawaii for the common good. And what we see on the ground, though, is that these plantation interests, their corporate successors continue to have a stranglehold on this water even to today. And that dewatering of Maui Komohana is really, and just decades of plantation water mismanagement is what led to the most destructive and deadliest wildfire in Hawaii's history. And so I think that's just really important to underscore.
Any other mana'o on the fire? Okay, so that brings us to plantation disaster capitalism, which really is just the latest form of colonization to take root on Maui and to sprout in the aftermath of the fires that devastated this island beginning on August 8th. It's really a tactic of exploiting moments of extreme trauma to facilitate a power grab, or in the case of Maui Komohana, a water grab, and one that wasn't possible when the law was in place. The term, as Drew mentioned, comes from an article that Naomi Klein and I co-authored in The Guardian in August 2023, in the days after the fires. And many of you know Naomi Klein's path-breaking work on disaster capitalism, right? Whether that was with respect to public education in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina in 2005, in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria in 2017, with respect to public education and electricity, Thailand, elsewhere. There's lots, unfortunately, too many examples. But plantation disaster capitalism really riffs off of that and was a brainchild of, where's Isaac Morawake? Isaac Morawake and his friends. We can blame it on him. But circling back to Maui Komohana, in June of 2022, the State Water Commission voted unanimously, and Kekai mentioned this earlier, right, to designate part of Maui as a water management area. And so this is an additional layer of protection, kind of like zoning, that's put into place when water resources are determined by the Water Commission to be threatened. And so this was a process that was actually started by the Water Commission itself. It took many months. There were lots of opportunities for community input. And this was done because of climate impacts, right? Things like drought and broad-based community support. But predictably, some development interest opposed designation because of the potential impacts on private profit. But given the severity of the situation, the Water Commission voted to uphold the law anyway, and to begin a water use permitting process. And so these permit applications were due on August 7th. The fire was on August 8th, 2023. And the water code was suspended by emergency proclamation on August 9th. So, Kekai, what happened in Lahaina in the wake of the fires?
We scrambling. We never see government in Lahaina for at least the first 2 weeks. We was living without water, without electricity, without food, everything you need to survive food that was coming into Lahaina was blocked at the Pali. So people took goods to boats and took the boats around Ma'alai into Lahaina to supply people there. And then we had the Coast Guard trying to block them too, which we didn't understand why blocking the necessities that we need. The roads was clear, we just needed the necessities, and we never see no government. A lot of, I'm not trying to sound like the Hawaiians the best, but I think because we grew up in struggle all our lives, that our legs become strong because we grew up in struggle and our shoulders become broad. So even though we had plenty ethnic groups that was part of the whole move to try and help as much people as you can after the fire, but a lot of it was led by Hawaiian people. We used to that kind of struggle. So when time came, we just mount up and started writing, and there's just and you know, 2 weeks without the government there. Never matter, because we was moving already, and people from all the different islands was coming all over with their boats, from Kauai too, from a big island, from Molokai, Oahu. Man, I mean, to see the people organize from all these different islands and bring goods in, crossing, our oceans in front of Maui get pretty nasty because of the way our island's situated. Get pretty nasty, and yet they're coming in. They risk their own lives. And so, but when the governor enacted his emergency proclamation and suspended the state water code, and we saw everything that we fought for so many years just get wiped out with a snap of a finger. We was already in a bad situation. You never really like hit one hurt dog. Yeah, you know, like hit one hurt dog, and he did. And the whole entire Lahaina went in an uproar because we fought for that. And in these times, like disaster capitalism, we're taking advantage of a time like this for your own benefit at the expense of our people and the pain and the hurt. And, you know, I think, Marty, it was you folks, right? You guys did fly me out over here. And I was like, oh my goodness, we stood in a fire, and then we're flying out, and we had that press conference stuff, and it's like, and the very first thing I said was, you know, I shouldn't be here right now. I should be home with my people, doing whatever we can for help people. Bodies are still in the streets, you know? And yet, because of something like this, taking advantage of this time, forced me to come out of my home, and you know, I felt was necessary. But what I said was, like, you know, I shouldn't be here. And I also was worried about, you know, right now, because of how everybody's, you know, moving, and we're trying to get, you know, people help as much as possible. We're not thinking about the effects mentally, you know, emotionally, that gonna come once we start to settle down. And we see them. I get one friend always threatening himself with suicide. You know, and yet we telling you can talk to a person and say, bro, we got you, bro. We're gonna rebuild your house. We're gonna take you back to where you was. You're gonna be okay. But sometimes when you look at that journey, we never even enter the tunnel so that we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And so he himself is like, man, I don't even be here anymore. And then we get things like this that come up. And then we get with the governor opening up tourism when we wasn't even ready for tourism, and we was moving people out of hotels, displacing our people that was displaced by the fires. You know, it's rough. What's really going on in our place right now in Lahaina? Disaster capitalism. We get insurance companies saying now they might not even insure homes in Lahaina anymore because of the threat of fire. How you buy a house without insurance? Or they plan on raising the insurance rates on us. You know, rent. You know, I know FEMA trying to help people out with the rent. Rent went going up to like $10,000, $11,000 a month for homes. Look at our parks filling up with homeless. You know, get some people who slip through the cracks and that FEMA cannot help. And they ending up at our parks, sleeping outside. My principal at the school that I was at, she lost her home. And what some people doing, and I'm not going to mention what kind of people they are, but to get the FEMA money, so rather than getting $6,000 a month, they want that $11,000, $12,000, $13,000 a month. They're canceling their leases with people, pushing them out, say, okay, I like bringing fire victims so I can get the FEMA money. That's disaster capitalism. And it's happening. What is also disaster capitalism is if we get 2,000 or 3,000 short-term rentals that used to be long-term housing for people that's converted into short-term rental for tourism, is empty. We can take all our people who lost their homes and put them into the short-term rental, only if the governor says so. He said, hey, emergency proclamation, put them in these homes. He never dropped a hammer on that decision. So during the Christmas rush, we had people being moved out of the West End, taken to the other side with very short time to get out. And we get these short-term rentals during that time maybe filling up, or right now, they're empty. And yet we still get displaced people. Just on the West Side alone. Those short-term rentals can supply housing, long-term housing for these people until they get back on their feet and back into their homes. So the beast is there in Lahaina. I never thought that people's anguish and pain was for profit. That's the real truth of what's going on where we live. You know, and I like to say, you know, the plantation is not growing sugar and pineapple anymore where we stay. They're growing resorts, hotels, and rich homes. Short-term rentals. Short-term rentals, a lot of those guys who own those short-term rentals don't even live in Hawaii. But they get mail sent there so they can vote in Hawaii. Yeah? So that's the reality of, get plenty more stuff in Lahaina that is the ugliness of what we're going through now. We're just trying to survive and get our people together and make sure let him know that everything will be okay. But it's kind of where we're at. We even get our county government along with the state government and people who supposedly be leaders in our community who's with the county going off and doing their own thing without even consulting with the community. Well, we're going to take the debris from the fire, the toxic debris. How are we going to redo our infrastructure so that we know a lot of these places, the telephone poles fell down. People couldn't get out. They were stuck. That you couldn't get over the telephone poles and they stay in the car and burn. I think it was 43 people in this one area where the street is real narrow, old plantation area, plantation homes, real narrow houses, maybe like almost roof to roof. 43 people died right in that area, couldn't get out. And so we like have say in how we're going to rethink all of this before we put everything back how it was. But yet, again, that's people trying to reset the status quo and kind of get us back into that mode of living. In fact, the HTA when they released one ad that says, "Oh, the people of Lahaina are ready to work and we're ready to serve." Serve, man. That's all we are, is servants. And that's what we're trying for change. Our selling of ourselves as servants is the reason why people look at us that way when they come to Hawaii, like we beneath them. We should never be like that. And it's been boiling for a while. It was coming to a point, but the fire took us there. And so we got a long road for go. We're gonna get plenty more mess that we're gonna have to clean up. Not just the fire debris, but a lot of our people too, and where we're gonna be in 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Mahalo for sharing those hard truths for those of us who aren't on the ground in Lahaina, but can now look at ways that we can better lean in to support the people who are there. So, Elena, how is it that even our legal protections needed protection from the governor?
Yeah, and I think, to answer that question, I have to give a little bit more context to the history of water struggle in Maui and all of the efforts of the community to really secure and protect their rights. In Maui Komohana, I think because of this history of water struggle, the commission, for the first time ever, on its own initiative, investigated and looked at amending interim in-stream flow standards. So that's the minimum amount of water that needs to be in the streams at all times. to support native stream life and downstream users. And after years of studies and consultations with the community, between 2018 and 2021, the Commission unanimously decided to restore stream flow to multiple streams in Maui Komohana: Ukumehame, Olowalu, Kauaula, Kahoma, Kanaha, Honolua, Honokohau streams. And as a result, downstream users who had been cut off from access, were finally able to access their legally entitled water. And almost immediately, communities started seeing native stream life rebound. And despite these IIFSs, these private water companies just violated them. They began to construct wells to pump groundwater so that they could evade regulation on the stream water that they're taking and avoid public transparency and accountability. And so again, the Water Commission took the initiative to explore designation, which is the zoning legal tool that Kapua talked about. And what that does is it gives the Water Commission the authority to invoke management authority over water uses in the region. And so again, after years of investigation, numerous public meetings, consultations, in 2022, the Commission unanimously voted to designate Maui Komohana as both a ground and surface water management area, which is the first time that that's ever been done in the history of the Commission and the Water Code to that extent. And it was under the hope of designation that community, put in the work to fill out water use permit applications and really relied on this process as being a way to bolster and protect their rights to water. And it's cruel. It's a cruel irony, actually, that these permits were, due on August 7th, 2023, the day before the Lahaina wildfires. And why this history and context, of this great community effort, this great commission effort to secure Lahaina's water future is so important is because shortly after the wildfires, it took one letter from West Maui land to undo years of hard-fought community victories to restore stream flow, to give the Commission the tools it needs to comprehensively and proactively manage water resources in Lahaina. And IIFSs were suspended. The chair of the Water Commission and the governor himself signaled his support of reversing designation, and the chair unilaterally reassigned the deputy director of the Water Commission, Deputy Director Kaleo Manuel, who is the administrative leader of the commission, removed him from his post at one of the most critical times in the Water Commission's history, and the AGs just stood idly by, while all of this was happening, despite the repeated requests from commissioners to clarify and confirm what their rights were, and their efforts to restore Deputy Director Manuel. And it took the community uprising and coming together, to ensure that these rights were protected and that Deputy Director, was restored to his post, and really that the integrity of the Water Commission was upheld.
Mahalo for that, Elena. The first panel talked a lot about the promise and potential of the public trust in McBride, but what you're describing really sounds more like trench warfare.
Exactly.
And there's also talk about the courts being one backstop, but it sounds to me like in Maui Komohana and really across the Pai'aina, the community is the real backstop, right? When all else fails, it's, as Kekai described earlier, right? It's neighbors coming to aid each other. So, Wayne, given this, right, less law and more bare knuckle politics, what's really going on here? This whole thing with West Maui land, Deputy Director Manuel, and the governor.
Okay. So, I guess to start, the Water Commission hasn't always been the champion for water protection, water management, stewardship. For years or decades, it was basically, the commissioners themselves are essentially plantation interests, like representing plantation interests and so forth. It really wasn't until we had a Hawaiian and a Hawaiian water law expert or water management expert on the commission, and then we had Kaleo Manuel come in that we see the kind of unprecedented progress that Elena just spoke to. I mean, not just on Maui Komohana, but East Maui, this island, Kauai, like IFSs are being updated. People are looking at water management areas. Staff are being empowered to actually implement the water code. And so, given that, and then looking at the things that were happening leading up to the fire, right? So, the governor declares a housing emergency, and then unilaterally repeals the laws that developers have targeted year after year after year that have at the legislature. The Maui entire electorate of Maui ratified a charter amendment that would establish East Maui Water Authority to manage the waters of east of Maui Hikina, so that it would be people of the community that would be directing how this public trust resources would be administered versus a Canadian pension fund, right? And as that water authority is being stood up, DHHL has a representative. That person, like it's not one of the most foremost experts in water law and policy, was put forward, and then we see in Civil Beat emails being revealed that show, certain people saying, "Oh, that DHHL person, the developers don't like him, so pick someone else." And eventually he was withdrawn, but then because of the community coming forward, they had no choice but to go with the first pick. And then the fires happen, and then we see what happened with Cleo. Like, basically, he's gone, right? Water protection's gone. What was also just, it's hard to find the right words to describe this, but what was also happening day after the fires, the Attorney General, so the governor's attorney, the government attorney, filed a petition with the Supreme Court and said Maui's in peril because it's being ravaged by wildfires. There's not enough water to fight the fires in Maui. So therefore, this 25 million gallon per water day cap on the amount of water that flows from East Maui to Central Maui should be removed. That was a very long, hard-fought, small measure of accountability for the theft of water from Maui Hikina. It turned out that the county attorney actually came forward because you can't let false information stand when it's submitted to the court, and said we didn't need more water. We had more than enough water. In fact, there was 2 million gallons of water per day that was still available under that cap. The county had used, over the course of 5 days, 33,000 gallons. So to say that you needed, to say you needed millions and millions of gallons of water per day when you only needed 33,000 gallons of water total over 5 days, and to make that claim just to tie the hands of an environmental court judge who tried to effect some modicum of reason and justice in the diversion of East Maui streams. I mean, that's like, don't ever do that. If you're a law student, don't do that. Like, as you can see, there's this pattern, right, that shows just how much influence this very small, very powerful set of interests have had, over various administrations, but I think in particular this administration, they've been given a lot of deference, and I think that's something that we all need to be very, very concerned about.
I can just say something. With the designation and the IFS in place, one of the obstacles right now is who's going to be the one to enforce? West Maui Land Company is continuously, to this very day, still taking water where they're not supposed to be taking. And so it's up to the community to kind of like pay attention all the time. And in fact, Oluwalu, I think West Maui Land was fined about $500,000 for taking out too much water. That was because a lot of the people in the community found out, and we called Aaron. Hey, Aaron. Just so happened Aaron was coming in the next day. Say, okay, don't say nothing, I'll be there. And they caught him. I never agree with the fine and how they structure the fine, kind of. Anyway, sorry. Because the modifications that they had to do to the diversion, they had to do anyway because they wasn't meeting the IFS. So the $500,000 fine was kind of used to say, okay, use that to modify the diversion. So basically, they're not really paying a fine. They had to do it anyway. And then the other part of that money is to go and line your reservoir so that your reservoir, when you can take water, is not gonna, lose water through seepage and whatnot and stuff like that. And I was like, wait, that just benefits them. It's like, it doesn't really benefit us. And I was like, so that $500,000 fine actually gave them a reservoir on their property that is more efficient, right? And then the modification on the dam that was supposed to have been there anyway. So it's like, and they continue to roll on and continue to divert water when it's not supposed to be diverting. In Kauaula, Kahoma, and the county still diverting in Kana'a. So, it's not that simple when you say, okay, we got all these things passed. Yes, I can kick my feet back and relax. No way. No way. You got to be vigilant. When I drive past Kahoma and Kana'a stream over the bypass, automatic my heckle is, and I'm looking. I almost get into an accident sometimes because I'm always paying attention to that river. Always. So, yeah. It's not done. You're going to have to be vigilant. You're going to have to continue to call up the commissioner, or call up Aaron, or call up somebody and say, hey, these are the things that's going on. Help us. It's not as simple as it seems.
Mahalo for all of that. And kalamai, but we were supposed to announce at the very beginning that we are trying our very best to save some time for Q&A at the end. And so there are index cards for those who are in the room, and for audience members who'd like to ask questions. And for those who are on Zoom, you can enter those into the chat. And so we're hearing a lot about what plantation disaster capitalism looks like on the ground in the community in Lahaina right now. But I've been hearing it's also going on at the Capitol. So, what does plantation disaster capitalism look like at the Capitol this session?
Okay, I'll try and take that one. I think that everything that happened in Lahaina was a wake-up call for the community. We're seeing the impacts of climate change. We're seeing water scarcity across Hawaii Pai'aina, and we're also seeing how easily these well-established policies and protections could be undone with the snap of a finger. And while Maui Komohana is definitely front of thought, an example of how politics influence water policy, this is a problem that permeates across Hawaii, in communities across Hawaii. West Kauai, He'eia are just two examples. And our communities are maka'ala, and they're looking for proactive solutions. And there are two things I think that are going on, in government right now. The first, and this is something the first panel this morning touched on, is Senate Bill 3327. That's a really important bill because it restructures the leadership of the Water Commission. It changes the deputy director position to an executive director position that reports to the entire commission. It prevents the DLNR chair, who's a political appointee, from serving as the chair of the Water Commission. It also allows the commission to issue stricter penalties for violations. Right now there's not too much deterrence, for violators, and so it would increase penalties so that it'd be more of a deterrence. It also gives the Water Commission emergency declaration authority that allows the commission to adapt quicker and respond to emergencies and water crises. And I think another really important piece is it gives the commission the ability to consult and retain independent counsel. And what we've seen historically and presently, in Lahaina, is the Attorney General's abandoning or, in the worst case, actively working against the Water Commission's interests. And so this bill is, an attempt to really help with all of these things and give the Water Commission the administrative tools and the ability to be objective and independent in carrying out its mission, which is to, manage and protect our water resources for the common good. And I think I want to note that this bill has moved through the Senate with overwhelming community support. It's had its first hearing before House Water and Land. You know, the last 2 hearings, over 200 plus pages of testimony were in support. And right now it's before the House Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs Committee. And we're really concerned that it's not going to get a hearing. And so I would encourage all of you to call your representatives, especially if they're on the Judiciary and Housing Affairs Committee, and encourage them to hear this bill that already has overwhelming community support. And, you know, yeah, I'll stop there before moving on.
No, thanks so much for that, Ellen. I think it is really important. You know, you talked about the emergency provisions. There's been a lot of talk about needing water for temporary emergency housing, and SB 3327 would provide the Commission with the tools to be able to help address that in its current form, because it was amended by the last House Committee. But we'll have to see. I think, I'm not an expert on this, but given the dates and crossover, I think it would have to be scheduled for a hearing by Tuesday in order to stay alive. So, and I would also note, there's been a lot of talk about everything people are gonna do for Lahaina. But to my knowledge, all the bills are dead, except for this one. So, if anyone is motivated to kokua, please contact, you said, Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs.
Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs, yeah.
That's where it's currently sitting. And it, the chair is Representative Tarnas, David Tarnas from Hawaii Island. So, but the other committee members also have an influence, and so that's where it is. And I would, Wayne, I wanted to kick it to you. So Elena mentioned Senate Bill 3327. There was also talk in the first panel this morning about the practitioner seat on the Water Commission that is becoming available, unfortunately, when Commissioner Neil Hannes terms out in June. Any mana'o on that and where things are?
Yeah, so it took a long time. It was a big fight to get just one seat in the Water Commission designated for an expert in Native Hawaiian water management and Native Hawaiian riparian usage. But you know, given that, which is interesting, given that our public trust doctrine or state water code recognizes the unique rights of Native Hawaiians to water resources, and so. But once we had someone, be it Uncle Neil sitting in that seat, to be able to give life to the vision behind that effort, which was to ensure that the Water Commission understood not just the water rights of Native Hawaiians, but I think how we can better steward and manage this resource for the public benefit overall. Then we started seeing actual. I mean, my old boss is like, oh, we don't have to go to the Water Commission anymore. Like, people were talking about the public trust. People were talking about traditional customary rights. It was so important to have that voice there, and that voice to be mindful and thoughtful and prudent. And right now, there's a big question as to who's going to replace the current commissioner in that seat. The way the process works is that there's 4 people, so one person picked by the Senate President, one person picked by the House Speaker, and then 2 people picked by the Governor to interview candidates, and then they give a list of names to the Governor, and the Governor picks from that list of names. We don't know for sure who's on that list, but we have some idea, but there is a very, very, very strong pool of candidates.
I think you might know who's on that list. Wayne Tanaka, don't you have just reach down into your na'o and think about what 4 names do you think would be on that list?
I think Hannah Springer might be a very good candidate. She's from Kaupalehu, one of the plaintiffs in Kapa'akai Ka'aino, which versus the Lands Commission, which established, as Lawson's might have studied, the very concrete framework for identifying and upholding Native Hawaiian traditional custom practices as our Constitution requires. Makahiapo Cashman, who runs Kapapalo'i over in Kanevai. And who would be the third?
Auntie Lori.
Oh yeah, that's right. And then Auntie Lori Buchanan, who has done tons of watershed work on Moloka'i, who's currently with the Maui Invasive Species Council. Her brother's Uncle Walter really as well, but she's done lots of things. Oh shucks, I said that wrong.
And one thing I just say about Auntie Lori, all three of those people that Wayne mentioned are true loyal, right? Yeah. They are experts in Native. And this seat is specifically created for someone with significant experience in traditional, customary Native Hawaiian rights and riparian usage. And the three people that Wayne mentioned are absolutely loyal. They could serve in this position. There has also never, to my knowledge, there hasn't been someone from Molokai on the Water Commission. So one thing about Auntie Lori's is, not only is she a Native Hawaiian woman, not only is she a DHHL homesteader and beneficiary, but that would help to fill that puka that has been long-standing. But I think there's a fourth name also, right? I understand.
Yeah, the fourth name who might be on the list that we don't know. Mr.
He might know, I think. Oh. Do you know who the fourth name on the list is? Kikai?
Yeah, let's see if you can say him, though.
His name may or may not be James Kimo Falconer.
Yeah.
A good friend of Uncle Kikai.
Just
kidding. He has testified against the restoration of stream water because it's a waste of water, among many other things. It owns lots of land in Maui Komohana. Has a very storied history of conflict with the kupa of that region. I don't have too much personal.
Maybe can you elaborate?
Pioneer
on that?
mill boss. Yeah. So he was at the sugar plantation. He used to chase us out of the mountains. We get coolie on the land. He used to chase us out, not because he knew that one know us. He knew who my family was, but just to be that kind of strong arm to keep control over their sugar fields and lands and water resources and stuff like that. So it kind of was shocking. In fact, when I kind of relayed the message after I getting that message to the rest of the people in Lahaina, I was like, what the hell? It's like another Kaleo thing all over again, So. Not that guy, for sure, not that guy. He's from Lahaina, but not that guy.
So yeah, I mean, given what we've talked about today and what we've seen, some of the decisions that have been made, especially under this administration, you can imagine who the administration might be inclined to select. Whoever the governor selects, that person will have to be confirmed by the Senate, with a hearing before the Senate Water and Land Committee. So depending on what name goes up, we may need to either really reinforce a really awesome person that got picked, or really make sure that the Senate does its job and make sure that the Water and Land Committee properly understands how important this seat is and how important it is that the person be the right person and not the wrong person to sit on the Water Commission for at least the next 4 years.
And just to add a little bit more on the process, so where we are right now is the 4 names have gone to the governor. It's up to the governor to do the right thing, and he has said a lot about how he's going to do right by Lahaina, and so I'm just going to cross my fingers and I have been monitoring Water Commission nominations for decades, and I have been monitoring this seat since it was created, and I have never seen a panel like the 3 names that Wayne mentioned. Clearly the most qualified loya in this area, right? Lori Buchanan, Makahiapo Cashman, and Hannah Springer. Folks from Molokai, from Hawaii Island, and from here, kala farmers, practitioners, limu gatherers, legit people of the land. And so it is my great hope that the governor will pick one of those people and not James Kimo Falconer, who I don't know. He didn't chase me out of the mountains when I was trying to exercise my traditional customary Native Hawaiian rights and practices. But the irony of having someone nominated in this specific seat that was created to protect these rights and interests, whose own work and legacy has been the antithesis of that, I think only further harms not just Lahaina, but all of us as a Lahui, because this seat is important for every decision that's going forward. And as so many people have already mentioned, Lahaina, the eyes of the world have been trained on Maui in the wake of the fires, but what happens there is a good indicator of what will happen across our paeaina for all of the rest of us. So I was trying so hard to save time for questions, but we have so many questions. from the audience. Mahalo, and they have been input into a Google Doc that I can see here. And so I want to at least, I want to see if anybody has any other mana'o before I go to at least one question.
You sent it out.
Anybody else? No? Okay. So, let's see. So the legacy of settler colonialism, this is our first question. The legacy of settler colonialism is undeniable. But settlerism is also the reason many non-Indigenous people who Kanaka Maoli share Hawaii with now live here. What would your message be to people who are settlers in Hawaii and looking to support its Indigenous people?
We had people settling here even before. Well, it's not a new thing that, came with colonization. To say that we was exclusive and not letting people in, that's not necessarily true. And I agree that, with the plantations and the bringing in of the labor forces from all around the world, it also kind of, I'm not full Hawaiian, I'm part Korean and I'm half Haole. And so, I probably wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. And so we understand that, but it's not something that, like, I always say, like, if it was under our control and we would bring in these people in as a kingdom, but we're doing it in a way that is, again, through the lens of our own people and our own wants and needs and desires and what we need, and not through a plantation or colonization type of lens, So, we was always accepting of all kinds of different people, even before the plantation started up over here.
Elena or Wayne, anything to add on that? Supportive settlers, words of advice?
Yeah, as a non-Hawaiian, I think one thing I've been reflecting on is just, what are the mechanisms by which settler colonialism operates, right? And its most insidious form today is complacency, and just going along with the status quo, and not recognizing how the status quo is not just destroying what we have left here in Hawaii, but it's destroying our hope for a thriving future. If you look at all of the ways that these systems are manifesting and impacting our lives, and maybe given what's at stake, I mean, it's not just complacency; it's like the banality of evil, right? What we saw after the fire in Lahaina, with the community just having this incredibly strong sense of connection and social fabric and care for each other. I mean, that's an illustration of what true resilience looks like. Now, we know hopefully Lahaina is the worst disaster that we'll see, but it's definitely not the last, given what's happening with our climate. And we really need to kind of heal our social fabric and mend our connections. We remember our love for each other and for this place. And unfortunately, if we just go along with the status quo, we're going to lose that. We're losing it now. And so, as a settler, I think it's important to recognize our moral responsibility, not to be passive observers, and not recognize it just as a matter of morality and justice, but as a matter of existential proportions for all of us.
I think one of my friends showed me this video of Kaleko giving a speech just a couple days ago, and he was talking about dirty water or muddy water. If you was drinking muddy water your whole life, muddy brown, you would not know if it's dirty. It's just normal to you. It's something that and then once you introduce to clean water, I think he got that from Elijah Muhammad. And this idea of, once you introduce to clean water, you don't go back to drinking dirty water again. Hey, this clean water is much better. And so a lot of us, and then again, that's where we got to transcend into a different level of consciousness. Well, some of us do drinking dirty water and perfectly fine with that because we don't know what clean water is, And so that idea, I was like, wow, I was kind of blown away. Just simple. It's so simple if I think about it. I bet you, guarantee, right now, if I give you dirty water, you don't drink them, right? But for a lot of us, still to this very day, we're still drinking dirty water in our minds. And that's the stuff that we got to kind of overcome and take a look at ourselves.
And I would just briefly add, if you're complacent and you're part of the problem, and I think I can speak for, the troublemakers and advocates or thought leaders out there, we're not doing this for ourselves. We're doing this for future generations, our children, our grandchildren, the 40 generations that's going to come after us, to make sure that they have a Hawaii to call home. And so, when there's a kahea or a call to action, to help dismantle some of these settler colonialist institutions, answer that kahea and support the community in that work, because, we can't do it alone, but if we do it together, then, that's how we can start to see progress.
Pro tips from Wayne Tanaka Maoli and friends. So our theme for today, our underlying theme is really E Hoʻi Nani, to return the glory to Maui Komohana. And that was really a mele or a pule by Paige Kekuaiva, yearning for the return of glory to Moku'ula. But in the wake of the fires, it's really become more than that, more of a rallying cry, I think, for people across Hawaii who are seeking restorative justice and a way to move forward from Maui Komohana's plantation past. So given that, I just wanted to ask each of the panelists if they had any last mana'o to share about what's necessary to E Hoʻi Nani.
Moku'ula and Mokuhina seems to be like the focus that the state, is looking at as being that, thing to rally around. I know for a lot of us in Lahaina, we see them a little bit differently. Well, Moku'ula is the indicator that if we do everything right in the rebuild of our town, Moku'ula going to happen regardless. And the return of Kiha going to happen. If we're not restoring our forest, if we're not utilizing R1, if we're not making sure that the IFS and the designation is being upheld, and just the use of water, we got to change codes. We got to do things different. That's the one thing that this whole thing when show us is that if we don't, we dead. It's going to happen again. And so, again, Moku'ula, if everything that we say we need to continue to have water in our future is done, Moku'ula will happen. Moku'ula will be the indicator, but it's the outcome.
So we have this vision and this legacy from C.J. Richardson and these really important and critical laws on the books, but we haven't yet really realized law coming to life on the land, in our communities. And so, I think the community is maka'ala, and we need to continue to be maka'ala and, answer the call to, work towards realizing, CJ's vision for Hawaii.
So I guess a couple of things. One, if you've passed through this law school, if you're an attorney or a law student, at least the last few decades, you've taken a pledge, you've taken an oath to endeavor always to seek justice. And so I would encourage you to uphold that, to follow that in everything you do, because that's really, I think, one of the gifts and responsibilities that you've been given as a student of Richardson and his legacy. And the other thing, I think, is to remember your love. They want us to think and act out of fear and out of hopelessness and keep us complacent. But I think if we remember what we love about this place and who we love and recognize that it's on us to protect that, I think, and we remind each other, because it's going to take all of us fighting to protect what we love to really, make the changes that are necessary to really guide Hawaii to a hopeful future and not one that the other side will inevitably lead us to.
Real fast. Our young our young, especially Lahaina, and Neil and our years been there when our young came to the commission, and how well they speak from kindergarten to 12th grade, and even our young adults now, Paele Kia Kona folks, and Kanoe and Kalama and all of them. They come into the forefront, you know, and I remember you saying we came such a long way as a people. I look at some of these kids that is in 2nd grade, they talk better than me when I was a senior or coming out of college. You know, I was like, their understanding and comprehension and their ability to communicate is just light years above, and give me hope. Because at one point I was like, oh man, after us, who's going to take the reins? It's scary. But with the Kanoe and Sets and all of these people bringing the kids and experiencing these things, yeah, I feel good. In fact, after that one commission meeting, I kind of spoke first, and I went to the back, kicked up my legs, and I enjoyed the show for 8 hours. So, our young, they're going to be the ones.
They will be the ones to help us hoʻi ka Nani. So if you'd like more information, you can follow Wayne at the Capitol Watch. You can go to the Ola i Kawai website. And I encourage you to take action on Senate Bill 3327 with respect to the Water Commission practitioner nomination and more. But please join me in thanking this phenomenal panel. Mahalo.
Thank you again to our panel 3 participants. Another just powerful conversation, and I want to acknowledge how much that these participants really laid on the table for us today about how personal and how critical this issue really is. It takes a lot of courage to speak out and have these kinds of conversations, and everyone in this room and on Zoom now has that kuleana and has heard that call to action to carry this forward and take these conversations outside, whether you're taking them to the legislature, to the governor's office, or just over the dinner table. So mahalo again for that. Can we please have one more round of applause for panel 3?